Hey, my name is Amy Nelson and I'm a folk singer-songwriter from Calgary. Thanks for taking part in Music Calgary's SoundOff Summit Digital Strategies, taking place online from Oak Kinstis in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. Before we begin, it's important to acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy. Siksika, Kainai, Bikini, Tsuut'ina, the Stoney Nakoda Nations, the Métis Nation Region 3, and all of those who make their home in the Treaty 7 region. For future events, make sure to follow Music Calgary on their socials and sign up as a member on their website for more programming updates. Now the moment you've all been waiting for, here to discuss all things on the airwaves. We have Mar Sellars from CHUO, Sarah Burke from SiriusXM, and Vish Khana from Exclaim.
We're here to talk about radio in a digital world. And my name is Mar Sellars. I've worked in radio off and on for over 20 years, which sounds crazy because I know I still look 16. No, just kidding. Yeah, I worked at the CBC many years ago at CBC Radio 2. Then I lived in the UK and worked at the BBC. And I've hosted college radio from Vancouver, CITR, to Toronto, CIUT. And now I'm on CHUO in Ottawa and CHMA in Sackville, New Brunswick. And that's sort of my background. Would you two like to introduce yourselves? Let's go with Vish first.
Hi, Mar. Nice to see you there via this thing. My name's Vish Khana. I live in Edmonton, Alberta, where I moved in January of 2020 from Ontario. I lived in Guelph, Ontario for 23 years, and then we moved, and then the whole world stopped working. So sorry. I really feel like it's my fault because before we left, everyone was like, aren't you going to miss the restaurants, your friends, the concerts? I'm like, yeah, maybe, not as much as you think. And then everything went haywire a couple months later. Anyway, like Mar, I come from campus radio, campus and community radio in Guelph. I started out at CFRU 93.3 FM, 2005. My wife and I started a college radio show of some renown called the Mish Vish Interracial Morning Show. And then I went on to CBC Radio 3 and then CBC Music. I still have a column on The Next Chapter with Sheila Rogers, an on-air column where I go and talk to Sheila about books. And I moved to Edmonton to work for CKUA, which I understand is Canada's first ever broadcaster. They were the first people ever on the air. So, and I'm here in more of a background capacity. I do some on-air stuff, not a lot of announcing, some producing, some segments, but I'm primarily doing kind of communications and marketing. And yeah, so I hope a very, oh, and I'm sorry, I also have a podcast that's relatively popular called Creative Control, where I talk to musicians, comedians, athletes, all sorts of people, just cultural creators. So yeah, pretty varied background in the realms of media and audio production. And I'm also a print journalist, so covering as many bases as I can. So that's me, Vish. Thanks, Mar.
Perfect.
So I'm Sarah Burke. I work at SiriusXM. I oversee 14 of our Canadian music channels, and that involves some partnerships with CBC. We also have, many genres in-house, from pop to folk to alternative rock to country, a little bit of everything. That is my main gig. But I also have a big perspective to offer from local radio because I come from local radio. So I used to be an afternoon drive announcer on CFPL-FM in London, Ontario. So that's FM 96. I'm going to call it done moonlighting shifts anywhere and everywhere over the last 10 years, but mostly at 102.1 The Edge in Toronto and currently at Indie 88 in Toronto as well. So I still love going live when I can. And I do host a weekly show on SiriusXM on our channel called North Americana. And it's called Sunday Service, hosted by a Jewish person. It's kind of fun. It just worked with the references that go along with gospel music. And I do host a podcast as well. It's new, actually, just launched in March. So it's called Women in Media. And it's all about, the perspectives that women face. There's many collective challenges that we face in the industry. And that's from sports to radio to TV. And that's just getting started.
Perfect. Yeah, I feel like I have a lot to...
We might have to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, I have a lot I could connect with on that. Yeah. Well, I thought for our first topic as an icebreaker, we could just talk about what we both all love about radio. and why you work in radio.
So I'll start then if we're going to be all shy. So I think it's twofold for me. I do love connecting with the audience when that's available, if it's a live show. So, you know, having callers on, even, you know, on a music level, having people vote on their favorite song, if it's like a Battle of the New Rock or something like that. Those are some of my favorite moments. But I have to say that now playing a more pivotal role in programming and seeing how rewarding the relationships with artists that you're fostering, those emerging artist relationships, and seeing where an artist can grow from point A to point B, say over even just 2 years when you've had something to do with that relationship, is probably one of my favorite parts of radio right now.
Yeah, I'm similar with that. And with, for me, it's the audience, you know, it's like, even if just one person emails after the show and goes like, hey,
Yeah,
I found like, oh, this band you played, like, it was so cool. And then I like bought their music, or I went to their show or whatever. That, like, it just has to be one person that just like makes my day, makes my week. I'm like, okay, cool. That's my one thing.
absolutely.
I guess I'll go. I'm going back to why I started on radio at CFRU, and it had a lot to do. People would pester me to do a radio show for many years, and I'd be like, "Why are they? Why?" Like, I didn't really understand the notion of just playing songs. You know, it felt to me like driving around your neighborhood with your car stereo up loud. Like, why am I showing off my songs? But then I started to do interviews with artists for print pieces. And, you know, invariably, Mar, you would know this, I think from your background as well. Like, invariably, you might spend an hour talking to someone and then have to write 150 words based on that interview, which is barely nothing. And I thought, oh my gosh, I have all these tapes of really cool conversations. I want to share them. And, you know, this is 2005, before you could, I mean, I guess even then I could have just uploaded it all on the internet. Uh, Maybe, I don't know if we had the same vehicles to do that, but yeah, it was more just, I wanted to share these conversations, and then really warmed up to the idea of sharing songs I liked. Like, I couldn't see it at first, like, what's the point of showing off? But then I started to realize there's a real benefit for the artists to be exposed to listeners and new fans. And I turned a corner on that, and that's how I approach my interview style as well. So for me, radio is very much like a lot of things, it's informational. I really like the idea of teaching people, and also as a listener, learning about culture and what's going on in the world and other people's perspectives. And I do think it's a wonderful medium for that. It's almost the best medium for that, because it's one sense, and you've got to, you know, you're listening, ideally. You know, these days everything's multi-platform. You get the video and you get the text and you get
Yeah.
So I like having the radio on because it's just one sense that I'm activating, and I'm processing and learning and hearing people's voices and their work. And that really appeals to me. The sharing, I guess, is the easiest way to put it. To me, before social media, I thought radio was how you shared
Yeah.
content, and I really still feel that way.
Yeah, you're right. It was how, you know, like, someone with a good record collection was the person that, you know, had a college radio show, or, you know, wrote a blog, or before blogs, wrote for the
You guys are really aging yourselves.
I know. That's
No,
such a good.
I'm 43 and I don't feel that old, and I do feel like, yeah, like, as you can tell by my long hair and beard, I'm a sage old wizard. I have things to offer people, advice, and that's, yeah, I do. Maybe we're old. I don't feel old. I feel like, Mar, we're
We're
not
closer
old.
in age than I
Radio keeps you young at heart, though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So one of the main reasons I still do college radio, and yeah, I'm not obviously college radio age, is that it keeps me on my toes. It forces me to constantly be discovering new music and seeking out new stuff, especially CanCon, you know, because I'm like, oh, I got to get my CanCon quotient in 35% or whatever it is, you know. And
yeah. Yeah, so I do think radio is still the best these days. We're talking during a pandemic. Live music is frozen. I do think radio is the number one place for discovery, frankly, because we tend to we live in such an on-demand culture now, and we self-curate, but there's also algorithms that are sending us things. But when you are driving, for me, it's mostly when I'm in the rare occasions where I get in my minivan and I'm driving around. I'm aging myself with the minivan. Is that what you're thinking? I have children. I have
You
to have
saw it come right out of my head.
Yeah, I got
You could
kids.
also like have a minivan just because you're so cool and you have a drum set and you're in a rock
Yes,
band.
that's true. I am a drummer, so I have I have
Mhm.
wagons and vans have been my life for quite some time before the kids. Anyway, when I turn on the radio, I don't know what's going to come next. And if I trust the curatorial aspect of the station or the host, the announcer, I'm going to learn stuff and be tuned. Oh, well, what is that sound? What is that band? What was that? And that's a little bit of putting myself out there. Like I could put on a record, I could put on something else, but I want to learn stuff. So I think whether you know it or not, when you flip on the radio, you're hoping to learn something that you don't know.
And trust.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And it is like people, I think a lot of people think radio is old and no one listens to it anymore, or it's just for like boomers or car drivers. But I think it is, like you both agreed that it was the most relevant discovery tool still. And I think that's what people forget. They think like so many people are focused on Spotify playlists or, all this stuff, but that's not curation. It's not the same. And it wasn't like, that's so passive. You know what I mean? Like people put on a playlist and they just don't care. And yes, people put on the radio and like tune out as well, but generally they're a little more engaged, I think, especially with the presenter like discussing it between than just some algorithmic robot.
Do you guys also find that when you add a song that, although there's playlists and everything, I still see a big bump in streaming numbers when I add a song to one of my channels?
I think because you have such a much, I'm on college radio. You're on SiriusXM, which goes everywhere. Yeah, I would say that is
Yeah,
huge,
I still don't really, I don't use a lot of playlist stuff really. Like I have my streaming service and I add, it's a weird situation. Like my perspective might be a bit skewed. I mean, maybe all of ours is because we get thrown music at us on a weekly, daily basis. Like if I go to my email right now, there's 50 people asking me to listen to an album.
Agree.
And,
me too.
That's just the nature of our work, right? So we listen a bit differently than other people do. And as such, I don't feel the need or the compulsion to go to a playlist to learn stuff. That's just my inbox these days, really. And so, yeah, that's maybe important to keep in mind as we speak. Like our perspectives and our experiences with music are maybe different than some people, a lot of people, just because we're in this industry. I do think like it's fascinating that podcasts have exploded because they're radio. They're really just unfiltered radio. And so people who like to your point, Mar, like radio is old fashioned or whatever, like that same person's probably got subscribed to 50 podcasts. You're just listening to radio in a packaged form, like an on-demand form. Really, I mean, again, less rules in theory and more raw in theory. But I feel like that's what podcasting has picked up on is radio, like the same vibe almost exactly. So
it's interesting that you said it's raw, because I would think podcasts are have better production because they aren't live,
No, I think sorry, and I don't know, Sarah, if you have a take on this.
I agree with Vish on this. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think I think part of what happened with podcasts initially is that, and the internet, is that people started to feel like kind of desensitized to ultra mediation, like ultra slick content. Like, what am I not getting from this?
And there's a parallel there too with social media and like polished video versus natural video.
Yes, exactly. That's where I'm coming from. So I think people feel there's a certain authenticity to podcasting, but it's also one of the reasons they like certain radio hosts back in the day. I mean, just to throw a name out there because he was significant to me as a kid, like Howard Stern's show was not like anything else.
I've never heard that name before.
Because it totally did not seem like, I listened to AM, FM radio in Southern Ontario. No one was talking like that. No one was saying those things. They were afraid to be authentic. And I think we've had it with campus and college radio or college and community radio. You got the sense that the person was real. They weren't speaking in some affectation, like they weren't being told what to play. You know, all of us, I think, have had jobs where they say, okay, you got to play this artist, you got to play these songs. You can pick a few things of your own, and people pick up on that. Like when I've been in situations where they've like, okay, you've got to backsell Puddle of Mud. I'm like, do you not know who I am at all? Like I never would like that. I can't be a salesman in that regard. I think generally people have picked up on that. These podcasts are this wild west of rebels who do and say what they want and talk to who they want. And that appeals to people more these days, of feeling like, yeah, I'm getting the real stuff. I'm not getting some mediated version.
Well, it's basically like they're the college radio of 2021.
Great parallel with the Howard Stern and the podcast. That's exactly it. What people yearned for from Howard Stern at one point, they are now getting from others who are doing the same things in their own way. Yeah.
Yeah. That's just a take I have. Yeah. So I think, but again, I hope what I'm saying is drawing a connection between radio, podcasting, a lot of the way we consume culture. It's really just like constant information, processing things quickly and moving on. And radio kind of hits that. It's fleeting. Like the difference between on-demand culture and radio, and I try to stress this at my work, is because we have, like lots of people, we pre-record interviews. And I've tried to switch people's language in terms of announcers and hosts. Like, don't say, tune in at 5:45 to hear this thing, here's a clip from it. You're automatically destroying the illusion that it's live and it's appointment radio. Because when I was a kid, you waited for if you didn't tune in to the TV when they said something was on, it was or set your timer if you had a DVR, it was gone. Like you never, like you might hear reporting about it and clips from it, but it was mostly gone. That's a huge, everyone expects everything to be around all the time. But radio kind of if you're, some of it's archived online and whatnot, but it's gone. It's really immediate and urgent. And I like that about it. Like, it's almost like it's a commitment, but it's not. Like any on-demand thing, you're like, okay, I guess I got to sit here for 2 hours and listen to these three guys talk about basketball. I guess that's what I'm doing today. And radio, like I go into my garage, turn the car off. It's going to be there when I come back. I like that. It's always there. And anyway, I'm digressing, but I think there's a lot of magic there.
We pull into the driveway and then they're like, oh, okay, wait, we have to sit here and not turn the car off because I want to hear the end of this. I'm still doing that.
That's
and it's 2021.
Too. No, but that's great. Like that suggests a real bonding relationship with something real, and it's in the moment. Like I hate to use the phrase in the moment or whatever, but like I hope I'm not saying anything out of turn. Like I do think a certain generation's like, I will just catch that later. I will just watch that thing that everyone's talking about later. It'll be there. And that psychologically is weird. Like I have kids, so I see it all the time. Like every day, they're just like, whatever, this right now is not important. I can watch it later. So you're not living in the moment. You're just like deferring the moment. Radio is, unless you're recording it all the time and listening to it later or expecting it to be there, you've really got to be there. And I think that's good. I think it's good to be like, I'm experiencing something real now. And I appreciate that about radio as well.
I think also for like the personal connection, the fact that people know it's live and that you're doing that right there, that's a different experience than if it's like, oh, this is canned. I know they pre-recorded it. And then it's just a repeat. Like people kind of know. That's well, also you have to be really careful about dates and talking about things.
Yeah, that's true.
Now with COVID, I don't in college radio, like I obviously pre-record everything. And so I'm always just like, oh my gosh, I can't talk about anything in the news or anything because I have no idea what's going to happen the next 3 days because I'm doing this 3 days in advance because my show's on Monday. So I have to get it to them by Friday morning. And I'm like, what if the whole, something like Parliament blows up? And I'm just not talking about it, la, la, la.
Or you're throwing to a song by an artist and since you recorded it, something has happened to them or what have you. Yeah.
Probably more realistic.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, Sarah, if you have a perspective on this, given that you work on the air, Are you allowed to even say that are you pre-recording a lot, and do you face
All
these?
of my SiriusXM stuff is pre-recorded, and that's to have a focus on the music. And usually, you're pretty safe with New Music Friday and then recording for Sunday. It's okay.
Yeah.
You know what happened this week. But for
Yeah.
Indie 88, when for instance, I'm actually filling in on evenings tonight, and I'm gonna pre-record it when we're done this Zoom. So it's gonna air a couple hours after I record it, and I don't expect anything major. But if something major happens, I am the person who would go back and re-record one. So
Like a
it's just
host
kind of
break.
constantly monitoring is a big part of it.
Yeah, so that is an important, as again, we're talking during a pandemic, so all my ballyhoo about the power of live radio is maybe a little bit undermined by the fact that so many of us are pre-recording. That's a fair point, but to Sarah's point, if you're doing it within at least a couple of hours of broadcast, it feels pretty live and real. I mean,
Yeah.
when I was at Radio 3, yeah, I would go in on Monday, Tuesday, and pre-record the whole week.
Wow.
Every day my daily show was done. I mean, a lot of it was meant to be like, anyway, it was going to be used as podcasts or whatever anyway, so it made sense. But yeah, that
I mean,
the urgency that I was describing earlier might be, if not lost, a little bit in flux at the moment for sure. Yeah.
yeah. No, we did the same thing back in the day when I worked at Radio Sonic on CBC Radio 2, because it was a national show and there's 6 time zones in Canada, and you can't be live on the air for 6. I mean, there was a show called Real Time that did do that at CBC, but I think they had like 10-hour days or something insane.
Well, I do think you were saying something about how you would think podcasts would be more polished. On a production level, they could be, and radio that you pre-record, I'm sure it sounds like the three of us have been in a situation where we're recording a 90-second or 2-minute host break or something, and you don't like it. So you go, you know what, I'm going to take that over. I learned early to let things go.
Yeah, I let them go. Like I stutter or I mispronounce a word and I just say it. I just leave that.
You just pretend, you psychologically have to pretend it's live or whatever.
Yeah, I do it live.
Like, I'm letting this go. I've got so many of these to do. And so there's that. But yeah, you can't fret and fuss over everything. I think you do have to put yourself, when you're pre-recording, you have to put yourself in the mentality that I'm talking to someone now and live, even though this might not air for 2 days.
Exactly.
It's a bit of acting, I guess. But yeah. Anyway, yeah, this is a weird time to be talking about the live power of live radio. I would admit.
I know, I feel like we're like pulling back the veil and like just like letting everyone know, by the way, all these shows you've been listening to even for the last 10 years, like
but if we were to like, get to I think what's underneath all of this is you have to be relative. The best you can for how you're recording or going live. That's
fair enough. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I guess I should go along with the digital topics here. Like, so we've been kind of talking about traditional radio, but how do you think the ways and how listeners are connecting and interacting with radio has changed with technology? Like, has social media been a good positive thing, or is it? Yeah.
I would say, and Sarah, did you want to go? I would say yes, but Sarah, did you want to go first, so to speak?
Sure. So that idea in traditional radio where you play a clip in your 1-minute break and then you direct them to the website or to wherever to find the rest of the interview. I think with what we just talked about, this perfectly sort of sets us up for this conversation, because I think now people are looking for that full interview with their favorite artist, and they're not so much concerned with the clip. So they might actually choose to listen to the on-demand version of what you're talking about first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think everything's upside down the way that it used to be. And if you are still doing it traditionally by playing a clip and sharing just little tidbits, snack-sized pieces, and hoping that people engage with that, there's a second opportunity for that engagement always that may even be bigger than the first. That's my take.
Yeah, I do. And again, I don't know if I'm doing this exactly right. And I don't have to do it with my own practice. It's mostly working with others. But I do think, my feeling is, if say Gordon Lightfoot is coming up on your show for an interview, and you have a promo to make for it, and the recording of the interview's in the can, I personally don't touch the interview. I say, Gordon Lightfoot's, my ideal PSA or promo would be like, Gordon Lightfoot, song clip, performance clip, something, tune in. And then once the broadcast is aired, then you start to clip, like, even though you have it, then to me, I would clip things. I think to Sarah's point, everything's kind of upside down. Like when, for example, if CBS has an exclusive interview or Oprah, for example, we just had the Oprah thing.
I was about to bring that up.
They did show clips from it ahead of time.
Yeah, we saw so many clips of it before it aired that I'm sure most people don't care about this, but to me, I was like, oh, they did it. Like, I just think psychologically, the anticipation is, oh, they did it already. It doesn't feel that exclusive. You already shared it with me that it was done. Not that it really diminishes like the experience of watching it on TV or listening to something, but I just think you whet people's appetite. This is just me. Again, I could be wrong. But you whet people's appetite with images or other clips or whatever, music in our case generally. And then once the interview is aired, then you really start to do the preview stuff. Like, here's a snippet, hear the whole thing at blah, blah, blah.com or whatever.
And again, what about the after of the Oprah interview? You wouldn't have had to watch that full interview to feel like you were fully caught up.
Exactly.
I think that's a good point
You
too.
just need the clips.
Well, and these days,
highlight reel.
My friend says he just reads the headline for any news story and feels like he's got it. So it is and with other companies, less so in radio, but other media organizations, so many paywalls now. I don't know what's going on with one particular Ontario-based media company, but they seem to have some sort of deal with Twitter where they can create a thread for some article. And I'm like, what the heck? There's like 5 tweets about this thing. And then you click on it and like, you got to pay, which I'm not against, but I think there's just, media is generally struggling to figure out how to keep people captivated by their content.
And paying for it.
And paying for it, yeah. And I understand it, and we all go through it. Radio is weird because it's traditionally been free. It's traditionally there for you. Like I said, you turn off or you stay in your car and wait till it's done in the driveway. But when you turn on your car, if you've got your radio on, you expect it to be there. And that makes it very democratic and egalitarian. Anyone can access it if you've got, I shouldn't say that, not everyone can have a car, not everyone can afford a radio, but in theory you could if you get the device.
TuneIn radio app, anyone can stream now.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing.
If you can afford a phone and all these things, yeah, like it's really, I think the upside down thing you've said is really valid, Sarah, because like we have no hesitation in spending, in theory, like depending on your plan, $3,000 on the phone, but you want all the stuff in the phone for free. And so there's it's an issue. In radio, we're lucky, we've always offered, I think for the most part, things for free. We're not competing with free like other media companies are. Newspapers who are like, you got to pay to read this article. Most of us are like, no, I don't. I figured it out from Twitter. I figured it out from whatever. I heard it on the radio.
Yeah, so, especially if it's a news story. Yeah, someone else will cover it.
Yeah, so it's a strange time. And the way we value information and content is kind of always changing. But radio, I would argue, yes, you can listen to it on a website now. Ideally, you can listen to streaming live radio. You can listen to it on an app. But by and large, as far as I know, most radio is free. In my case, in the community sector, you hold fundraising campaigns and you ask, for that kind of thing. But so
it's paid for by someone.
Yeah, it is paid for by someone.
Or a university or CBC.
Advertising or whatever.
And the commercial radio is all advertising. And that's the thing is, with commercial radio, like how many people are tuning in? Like, can they still make the same radio advertising dollars that they did before? Because are people choosing other things to listen to?
I think Sarah may have more insights about that based on her work with some of the commercial stations in Ontario. But yeah. I don't know if you are even privy to that info or want to share it, Sarah?
I'm not sure that we need to get too far in the weeds on that stuff, just because I know there's other stuff that we want to discuss. But I will say that you can tell that what is funding our content, whether it be local radio or, you know, a subscription service that, you know, like you need to wait for the ads to finish or whatever it may be. You just have to remember who's in control of you know, funding the service.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with that in mind, like, so I kind of feel like the big dogs, let's call them, are still, you know, the traditional commercial radio stations, and in Canada, CBC, or, you know, BBC in the UK and stuff. And with technology now, you know, it's opened it up. Anyone, like you were saying, can make a podcast or whatever. Like, is that basically, like, for me, it's a positive thing because I'm hoping it gets more diversity on the air. But like, how do we get that diversity into the big dogs, you know?
Yeah, there's sorry, Vish, I'll be very quick here and pass it over to you.
No, it's a bit confusing. No one's being addressed, so I'm just like, it's just free for all. And I'm sorry if I've.
Don't worry.
I'm sorry. I was.
Guys, you're being
three of us
so
having
Canadian.
A conversation here.
Very Canadian. No, I know. I have learned from panel discussions to be like, Mar, what do you think? And then it's just like less chaos. But anyway, please go for it.
I was just gonna say, you know, for example, a small station, like it's a mom and pop station, Indie 88, you know, they have a very small company compared to a Rogers or a Bell or a SiriusXM, you know. And with that, there have always been questions about diversity. But another thing there is, you know, with, let's say a posting goes up and people are wondering why there's not someone diverse on an on-air lineup. I think we have to remember too that, you know, we might need to create a program to foster that type of talent, because, you know, there's been wish lists for what we need on the air, whether it be diversity or another piece, you know, humor, it could be anything. But what the people that you put on your radio station represent, sometimes you're choosing from a pool. And if there's not enough in the pool to choose from, that's quality, then we have to foster the talent. I think that's a really important discussion, because it's really easy to point fingers and go, there's no one of color on this lineup. At the same time, you know, as someone who hires in radio, because I have a team at SiriusXM, you know, I know that there might not be enough to choose from for the quality I'm looking for. So I think it's really important that we get, you know, programs in place that foster those talents.
I mean, for me, sorry, Vish, I know you want to talk. The biggest thing with radio is because you can't actually see people, you can only hear them. It's more about a diverse voice. And for me, the big thing is female and male voices. You know, predominantly, there have been a lot of stations that you'll listen Monday to Friday and it's just all male. There won't be a single female in there. They might get like one weekend evening slot, you know, and accents, I guess, can come across. But other than that, yeah, those are the things that come across for radio for me for diversity.
Or names, obviously.
Names
like,
as well, yeah.
I won't get into the fact that I interviewed at Indie 88 and they didn't hire me. No, I do think the gatekeepers thing is a big one. Like, if you want diversity in your organization, it has to start as close to the top as possible. If you want to reflect a diverse audience, then you need to program diverse, like, music. You need to, there was a thing where one of the Toronto stations would only play a cover of a Drake song by a white rock band. And I was like,
that's
why don't you just play the Drake song? And the racial undertones of that were obvious to me. Like, what are you doing? Like, it's just so plain as day that you think your audience is, you know, majority white, and that's maybe where your broadcasting area is. But if you're in Toronto and you're under the delusion, I'm just picking Toronto as an example.
Yeah.
That you're not in a multicultural place, like that you don't necessarily have the ability, by even being like, on the weekends, we have a show devoted to soul or R&B or reggae, and we're going to try to create gateways into those communities. Like, to me, it's just like, I mean, diversity, being a thoughtful human being notwithstanding, on a business level, you're blocking off, like you're just alienating or not welcoming in a whole cohort of people to your business, I think. And so yeah, I think there's diversity is a huge topic, and there's a lot of nuances maybe to it, but I do think it's also as simple as hiring people you want to reach out to, like hiring people that reflect the people that you want to reach out to and you could be reaching out to. That's how I feel.
While I hear you, I want to bring up something too. Commercial radio and local radio is still very much fitting artists and people in boxes. And as much as we've talked about the beauty of local radio and terrestrial radio, I think it's important to think about like the Drake thing that you just mentioned. I don't know what station you're talking about, but to me, it sounds like the cover was maybe outside of the format, which is why they played that. Perhaps I don't know, it would be that obvious that it was maybe because it wasn't R&B or rap or hip hop. But if it was a cover that was a little outside of that, I could understand from a programming perspective why that was chosen versus the original. But that's the only reason that would make sense.
Yeah, like it's a rock station, so they
exactly
only play rock.
Now, well, let me say this.
But they played white dudes rapping Drake lyrics.
Oh, if it was just rap for rap,
yeah,
then that's dumb.
Yeah,
that's dumb.
But like, I was like, yeah, I'm done. Like, I can't.
No, that's terrible.
On board anyway, but I was like, I'm done. Like, what
that's
are you
dumb.
doing?
But as someone who programs an alternative rock station on SiriusXM Rock Channel, it's called The Verge. I can say that I can recognize that it's one of the most whitewashed channels that we have. And I've been on the lookout and engaged in conversations about diversity to the point where I'm even posting on my personal socials, asking for people to send in songs, like looking for new music from people of color all year round. And still the slim pickings of what works for the channel are this big, but it's for an important point, because the best song wins. Right. So I think we also need to consider that in music programming, as the way that we're trying to make our station sound. You're not going to put R&B songs on the air in the middle of your alternative rock channel just to get a person of color on the air. That doesn't make sense. Sure. So that's why I'm saying, I think as the big dogs in the industry continue to operate as they have for years, those are the people and the collective groups that should be thinking about how can we get more diverse voices on the air. Maybe there's a specific grant or, a partnership with a school, with a music industry program. Those are the things that I think, like, if we can up the quality, there'll be more to pick from.
Yeah, I see your point of view. It's a huge topic. I do think generally people who are racialized don't feel like they have the entry point to even get in a campus studio to work on their chops. And they're only really called upon to participate, to not only, but often called upon to participate in such things to tick a box so that the organizers feel like, okay, we got some diversity. It's a big topic. I do think, I don't disagree with your ideas about granting systems and programs and whatnot, but I also think you just got to put your money where your mouth is. If you really care about this stuff as an organization, as a radio station, as a media company, you bring people in, you find them, you talk to people,
and that was
go out into the community and you play music there's tons of people from diverse backgrounds playing every genre of music. You just have to hunt for them. We are hunters for art in our work. So if we're not doing that work of saying, like, this is a really amazing rock band from Mali, for example, or India or wherever, then we're doing a disservice to our audience by just playing the same white rock band over and over again. I mean, I do think the one thing about radio that I think people also once rejected, and if you're lucky, you don't engage in it, but just the repetition, the same songs, the same artists over and over again. Like, that's another reason why people, like, to your point, Mar, like, some people just don't get it. Why would I listen to something where they're playing the same song from an album? Like, you've got 12 songs to choose from, and the programmer's like, you have no idea how much work it is to enter a song into our database and get it into rotation. You have no idea. It's hours of work. We get that, but at the same time, I'm sick of hearing that same song, even if it's a single. Like, you've got a whole album, play other stuff. Anyway,
And that's how commercial radio works.
I know, and it's
because they're also not like people aren't listening usually for long periods of time. It's like they're in their car
in and out,
and so if you're not playing that song every hour, they're like, man, I tuned in and they didn't play any of the hits, you know. Or
sure, it's commercial radio is never been something. I mean, I guess the closest, like Mar, you and I, maybe CBC, like that's the closest we've come to any kind of.
I did work I worked at BBC Radio 1 in their live music team. So
that's right.
I mean, BBC Radio 1 is top 40. It's paid for by the government, but it is the most commercial station with no ads.
I'm coming from a maybe more countercultural point of view, and less dictated. I mean, dictated by listener interests, of course, but I'm also generally in positions where I'm mandated to help shake things up. So that probably says something about me, and I try to keep. I don't know. I'm also not we're talking a little bit about casual music listenership, I think, too, whereas some of us are just like open-eared, have been for most of our lives. Like I listen to everything, but keeping in mind that the average, if you will, radio listener maybe doesn't do that. They want to hear the same song, like you say. So anyway, getting off on a tangent maybe.
Do we want to discuss at all like license requirements, because mandates and what you're required to do? I would love to play an awesome rock band from, you know, somewhere else in the world, but I have to play 85% Canadian content across my 14 channels on SiriusXM. Any of them on the satellite, I have to play 25% new music, which means a release title within the last 6 months of today. So that's a fluid number. It changes. It's always 25%, but the pieces that count toward it are changing, and emerging 40% on all of the channels. So every time I send a log, it has to be 25% new, 40% emerging. And then we have all of our channels set up to hit the 85 as an aggregate total.
85. I thought it was 30% Canadian.
So regular radio, it's 35%.
35,
SiriusXM has a different license.
Right. Sure. That's fine. I mean, I appreciate that. But again, I think it's a lot of ear to the ground, sort of taste making, risk taking that you have to do.
Of course.
To showcase people of color and people who aren't represented by labels, agents, and whatnot. Like we are, particularly now, like, I don't know about you all, but like I was fine. I've been relatively fine missing without live music. Like I understand there's a pandemic, but I've said this a few times to different people on my podcast. I am really missing the discovery aspect of seeing an opening band.
Yes.
Like I don't feel, last year when I looked at who was on my show in 2020, so many repeat guests, so many people with new albums, but just like so many people I talked to before already knew their music or their work. And that really gave me, I'm like, oh my God, like I'm not finding things all of a sudden. I don't feel like I am, or it was a weird year. We all sought comfort and familiarity wherever we could. So I chalk it up mostly to that, because I did hear lots of cool new stuff and I tried to showcase some of it. But yeah, anyway, I do think it's a weird time.
But it is more curated how you're discovering it, because it's the people sending you the emails or people that are getting talked about on blogs or being added to playlists.
Social media, like I find things from people posting about it, like friends or people whose opinions I trust. I'm like, oh, I didn't know about that. I'm gonna check it out. And sure enough, it's often good. But I just mean, like, I also am really sold on a live band. I'm on the fence about a record or something. I'm like, I know there's an artist, Nisa, that I love, and I happened to see her twice once in 2018 and once in 2019. Then she put out a record last year, and I'm not sure. I love the record. It was my favorite record of last year, but I know that love was informed by those 2 times I saw her and was like, what the hell?
Yeah, like, she's got a very powerful stage presence, and it's just her. And I think that's how she really wins people over, is her live performance. I would agree. Like if you just heard the record without knowing what she looks like and how she carries herself on stage, it would not have the same powerful impact.
So I think we're all at a disadvantage as radio programmers too right now in terms of discovery of new and underrepresented and marginalized voices. But honestly, I think that's our job. That's really a big part
Yeah.
of what we need to be doing in terms of being inclusive and being mindful of diversity on the airwaves, whether it's the announcers you have, the hosts you have, reflecting hopefully multicultural backgrounds in Canada. There's certainly enough of us that could be called upon to talk on the radio and present stuff we're interested in. Just like, to me, a person who immigrated here when they were 5 years old and has lived in Canada the whole time, them choosing to play a Toronto white rock band from Toronto is fascinating. Just what is your perspective? Like, where did you come from that you landed? Like me, I'm the whitest guy I know. I have I have Pavement B-sides. What kind of Indian man has B-sides by the band Pavement? So like I know, but I
Well,
know
you
how I
do.
got here. Like my parents came here from India and they raised me here, and I glommed on to. I got to go to therapy or something again because I don't remember exactly how I landed here. But like, yeah, I was like, white culture, interesting. Indian culture, I've got some reticence for. I think that's fascinating. Like hearing people, not me specifically, but people like me who are first generation, got into music that is played by commercial radio or whoever, independent radio. That's fascinating. Like, so I do think there's a lot of us out there. There have been a lot of us out there. It's just a matter of gatekeepers, I think, trusting us to opine.
If
And
I may jump in
yeah,
on that. So I've been overseeing the Indigenous music channel on SiriusXM. It's called Canadian Indigenous Peoples Radio since I started in 2017. I very quickly figured out what was wrong with the channel. An Indigenous person was not programming it, A. B, it's called Canadian Indigenous Peoples Radio, and Indigenous people and Canadian borders, that should not
Yeah.
be a thing. So I have been, as an ally, working very hard with that community to change the vision of that channel. I have hired 2 Indigenous people. I'm so excited about this. I've been fighting for it for a couple years now. We're coming up with the strategy and the new vision for the channel right now as per their perspective, not mine, which I'm going to bring, of course, my radio programming perspective to it. But I'm so happy with how that's turning out. And that's where the gatekeepers have to trust the people that are working for them too, to work on those relationships, because there's no chance that someone sitting all the way up here as a CEO is going to understand what's going on at this level down here with people doing the day-to-day work. So I just wanted to say that, it is up to, like, I'm a privileged person and I wanted to speak up, and I have rubbed people the wrong way with the discussions I've had over the last 4 years, but it's worked. And here we are in 2021 with an Indigenous music team coming together, and I'm so proud of it.
well, that's for what it's worth. That's really appreciated, Sarah. Thank you for
Yeah.
doing that and speaking out, because I think that's what we need to see more of, is people who acknowledge their own privilege and making space for others. That's all people are asking for on some level.
And did that mean going to Indigenous conferences and being the only white person in the room and sitting in my own discomfort? Yes, but it's an important piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, cool. To tie it back to the digital thing, I was thinking about how, we've talked a lot about the, technology, or like how people consume radio, podcasts, or streaming, or, the old fashioned way in your car. But how about from the programming perspective? Like, back in the day, and I want to talk about this, like, in case musicians are tuning in and like, how do I get my music on radio? Back in the day, you would mail your CD or record, whatever, to, and people, there'd be a music director, and they either.
Ooh, could I share my screen to show you guys something?
Sure.
Okay. So this actually connects with the Indigenous situation, because one of the first things I realized, I'm just bringing up the page here. One of the first things I realized working for Indigenous Peoples Radio was that the artist didn't know what pieces I needed, metadata. And I wasn't dealing with a lot of labels. I was dealing with independent artists who maybe are sending me an MP3. They're not sure what format to send. They don't know what information I need to put something on the air. I feel like building this system, which was to help break down one of those barriers, has maybe, I'm not allowed to share the screen here.
Oh yeah, I realized you're not a host. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Don't worry about it. So I'll, if anyone wants to check it out, it's SiriusXM.ca/music-submissions. So what I essentially did was built a little, you guys maybe have used DMDS or Play MPE. I built something a little more independent artist friendly. And it was meant to start with just our Indigenous artists, but now it's being used by every channel that we have. So I think breaking down some of the barriers just for independent artists in general is a way that we can use technology to our advantage, because it allows, just like any band can now record, just like anyone can do a podcast now, anyone can submit a song. So that's my take on that.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's also, for me, it might be a disadvantage as well, because it was more streamlined and simple before. You're like, I send my CD and then it gets programmed, and the people, like, say, let's use college radio as an example. You know, the people come in, they're like, oh, these are the CDs in the playlist, and they play them on the radio. Now everyone can just program their own show, like on Spotify, make a playlist, or like bring their show in on a USB stick with an MP3. You know, like, how are musicians, you know, getting in to actually get played on the radio if it's not like a centralized system anymore?
What is so the issue you're saying is that it's all decentralized.
Well, it more so now. I from my perspective, like I see a lot of people online being like, how do I get played on, you know, I'm trying to use Earshot Digital, you know, like that's like a new, you know, and they're like, is anyone even using that? You know, and well, especially during COVID, like no one really even physically going into the stations.
Well, I mean, I know we're running out of time, but I would briefly say that I do think if you're an artist or representing an artist, figuring out who the music director of any station, if they still have music directors, I should say these days, but if there's a music director, figuring out who that is still your best point of contact, because that centralization that you're talking about, for most, I would say 70% of programmers, that's still their first point of contact, is what the music director has placed in the library, respective library. But I also think potentially reaching out to, depending on the station, but reaching out to the host or the programmer might be another way to go. It's complicated. We all get thousands of emails. A lot of us get thousands of emails every day, and packages and all sorts of things. And I don't know, it's confusing, and I feel badly. Like, the things that I wanted to talk about or play, I would. And the things that didn't jump out at me for whatever reason, I didn't. And depending on my desk, there would be piles of CDs or records.
No, it's a pile of emails with the information,
piles
right?
of emails. So the piles are still going to pile up, even if you reach out. Like, it's the same as it's always been. A little bit of fortune, timing, good luck. Like, I don't know. I don't have a lot of. You're trying is the best thing.
I might throw in one final sort of sentiment here, and that is knowing your audience. You know, I get a lot of, with that music submission system that I just mentioned, I get a lot of artists who are submitting to 6 different channels. And that tells me that you're more concerned with getting played on SiriusXM than you are about where you would like people to hear your music, what audience. So, you know, my best advice for artists is always know your lane, know your audience. And, you know, is it cool to share your music everywhere? Absolutely. Is it cool to get playlisted with a song that sounds a little different over here and something over here? Cool. But if you're actually trying to build your profile, you need to be thinking about the audience that will stick with you.
Yeah, and I think that I would also just suggest, like, it's a weird combination of assertiveness and just being chill. Like, just don't push yourself.
Like, follow up, but don't follow up 12 times.
Yeah, like, leave it alone. Like, if someone's not responding to you, or
and do your research. I get so many because I've, like, you know, switched stations, or I'm not at that, and they, like, the subject title and I'm like, I haven't even been there in 2 years, like, and I don't like your music, and you've emailed me 6 times now, like, get the message.
That can be kind of fun, because I was just recently CC'd with an older CBC colleague, and I hadn't talked to them in 12 years or something. And then we were like, hey, what's going on? Like, we jettisoned the person who emailed us, being like, hey, can you two play the song? So feel free to CC me with my old colleagues. I'd love to talk with them, at least, if not hear your songs. That sounds smug, but I'm being funny. I'm trying to be funny.
I found you funny, so.
Thanks, Sarah. You too.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for taking part in this. I think we're down to the end. It was really nice to chat to both of you.
Nice to chat with you guys too. Should we like leave, some like our social handles, or I don't know, like it doesn't seem like it's going to be an email situation perhaps, but like
Yeah,
where,
go for
what
it.
about your
Yeah.
show and stuff, Vish? How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can find out about me on socials. I'm at Vish Khana, or at Vish Creative with a K. My show is called Creative Control. The podcast is called that. And my website, Vish Khana, has most of that stuff. And the podcast is available on every single podcast platform and maybe your appliances by this point. It seems to be, there's podcasts everywhere. Everywhere. What's in this plant? Oh, it's a podcast. They're everywhere. Anyway, yeah, vishkhana.com or at Vish Khana for most things. Thanks for mentioning that, Sarah.
For me, it's at Burke Talks for my socials, most of them, and the SiriusXM music submission page. If you Google SiriusXM Canada music submissions, it'll pop right up.
Perfect. And I'm Mar Sellars on all social media, and my website is maronmusic.com.
Or Marin Music. Mark Marin Music is. I always am like, is that from Marin or is it from Mar? I always get it.
I know. My name rolls into too many names. And the fact that my last name starts with an S, I get so many emails saying, hi, Mars. And I'm like, ah. Anyway,
thanks
great
for
to
that.
chat.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was great talking to you guys.